Today I am going to be showing you how to make these wicked good mug rugs. Now I'm a fan of witches and witching, and I'm sure you are too if you're interested in watching this. Otherwise, it's just plain spooky fun. In today's video, there's going to be some cross stitching and some other very basic embroidery stitches that I show you how to do in case you're unfamiliar with them. Otherwise, if you do any kind of crocheting, the rest of this is your basic crochet stitches. I just show you how to throw them all together in order to create this wicked good mug rug. Yeah, sorry about that. At any rate, let me give a warm welcome to all my Weaving Wyrd siblings, weirdlings, and just fun people. For those of you who aren't in the know, my name is Sig. I am a retired tattoo artist turned active fiber artist and crocheter. And here on my channel, you and I get to create a little magic with every knot. So whether you're watching me on YouTube or Rumble, go ahead and hit the subscribe or follow buttons, the like buttons, the thumbs up, leave a comment. These things help the algorithm, and this does actually support me quite a bit. And if I can get just the littlest bit of support, that allows me to continue to make more videos, which I really want to do, and I'm hoping you really want to watch. So let's just go ahead and get started then. So for today's project, I'm going to use a variety of yarns. Now, you will decide which colors you want to use for which part of this project, and you will clearly see which colors I choose for which parts of this project, or even look at the examples that you just saw before this part of the video, and that'll give you some idea. For the example I'm showing you today, these 9 colors are what I will be using. And again, what colors you choose to use is entirely up to you. And once you watch the video once through, you'll get a much better idea as to how you want to approach this according to what you want and maybe what you have available to you. Now, there are a couple of things about this that you really need to keep in mind. So, for example, this project, I am using a fingering weight yarn. Now, if you choose to use a heavier weight yarn, your piece is clearly going to be bigger and you're clearly going to need to use a larger hook. But for this project, which works out to be about 5.5 by 7.5 inches, is made with fingering weight yarn. Also, because this is a mug rug and it's designed to handle hot things like hot liquids in a cup, or you could even possibly use this as a trivet if you have a smaller bowl but need, or pot that's super, super hot and you need something to place it on. This is perfect for that. However, because a mug rug is really designed for use with hotter items, as a general rule, not all the time, but as a general rule, and I assume if you're using hot tea or a pot of tea or your coffee, you're going to want something that can handle the heat without any issues. So for that reason, you are going to want your yarn to be either 100% natural fiber, such as 100% wool, 100% alpaca, 100% cotton, or 100% linen, something along those lines, or a blend of those natural fibers. So this is really what you want your yarn to be. In this case, I am using 100% wool. This is a New Zealand wool, what's referred to as a rustic wool, if you like. So for those of you who have sensitivities to wool, you may want to consider using cotton or linen or something along those lines, because obviously working with straight wool that hasn't been processed to the degree of like a super merino is going to pose a problem for you. Next, you're going to, of course, want a pair of scissors. You're going to want a yarn needle or a tapestry needle with a larger eye, but in this case, I think a decent yarn needle will work for you just fine. And then the hook size I'll be using today with this project is going to be a size E, also known as a size 4, also known as a 3.5 millimeter. Next, the embroidery stitches you will be doing, and I will show you how to do them, are going to be a stem stitch, a lazy daisy stitch, a French knot, and also a cross stitch. So for each wicked good mug rug you make, you're going to need 2 rectangular swatches of fabric. And so I'm going to show you right now how to make those. You're going to begin by chaining 33 stitches. So 1, 2, 32, and 33. Next, I'm going to want to place a single crochet in the second chain from the hook. I am going to be working in the back hump. That's this part right here. So you have your front loop, your back loop, and then you have the back hump. Now you can, of course, make your single crochets any way you care to. So if you make your single crochet using the back loop only for your foundation row, that's fine. If you use both the front and the back and combine them together, as some people do, to make your first or to make your single crochets in your foundation row, that's perfect too. However you do it, it doesn't really matter. You do you. But I'm going to use the back hump to begin making my foundation row for my single crochets. And when I've finished this, I am going to have 32 single crochets, and I'll meet you right back here once I've finished this foundation row. And 32. So that's the completion of row 1. I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to chain 1. Now for this piece, your turning chain does not count as a stitch. So I'm going to want to single crochet 32 single crochets for row 2. So this one right here, where my turning chain comes off of, I'm also going to begin my first single crochet in that same stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. So once I've completed row 2, I'm again going to turn my work and I'm going to repeat row 2 22 more times. So in the end, what I'm going to have is a swatch of fabric that works out to be 32 single crochets long by 24 rows high. So I'm going to do that, and I will be right back with you to show you what that looks like. Okay, so now I'm back. I have my 2 swatches. One swatch is going to be what I do my embroidery on, and the other swatch is going to act as a backing for the first swatch. So now I'm going to set my second swatch aside because I don't need to use it just yet. We'll be using that later. And I am going to begin my cross stitching pattern. So again, I'm going to have 32 single crochets long by 24 rows of single crochet. Next, we're going to begin by going up 12 rows and then coming over 16 stitches. And that's going to be the center part of our swatch, and that is going to be where we begin our first stitch. So I've included my basic hand-drawn chart for the witch's hat that I designed. I also have it color-coded, and right here in this darkish yellowish square of this particular grid is going to be the starting point. This is where I'm going to start and make my first cross stitch. I am also including a basic diagram of the cross stitching itself for those of you who feel like you may need to also take a screenshot of that, as you will probably want to do with this witch's hat pattern, and you may decide to refer back to that. But moving forward, as you can see, each color indicates the different color I'm going to be using in that spot. So, for example, I have my dark purple, my light green, my dark green. This is kind of a light lilac, and this serves as the highlight for my witch's hat. And in here, you can see I have a couple of different pinks, if you will. And that will be the background. We'll be moving on to a couple of very basic stitches to give more a flowery detail to the witch's hat, but this is what I have going on with this right now. And so please go ahead and just go ahead and take the screenshot of this. This will be really helpful for you. Now, of course, you don't have to use the colors I've used. Just go ahead and use what other colors you think are going to look great with your background, and also what you may have on hand or what you would prefer to do yourself. Okay, so first, just a little bit of setup for you, for those of you particularly who have never cross-stitched on crocheted fabric before. For this particular piece, what you're going to do is you're going to count over 16 stitches, and in that 16th stitch, you're going to place your stitch marker. And then from the other side, from the right side, you're going to count over 16 stitches, and then you're going to place your stitch marker in that 16th stitch. So because we have 32 stitches on the row, our stitch markers are going to be situated like this. And that's fine, because what you're going to want is, as you cross stitch, you are cross stitching the bar, right? This part of the stitch. And this part of the stitch pretty much sits right in between the two chain stitches, for lack of a better description, right here on the bottom of your work, basically. It's just the way the stitches work out. And so you're going to follow that up to the designated location, which is basically going to be 16 over and 12 up. And you're going to mark right there in that same bar that sits right between these two stitches. And this is where you're going to place your very first cross stitch. And this is where the rest of your work is going to work out from. And this will ensure that your work stays center on your fabric piece. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to turn my work over to the back. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to find a place I can weave my yarn in a little bit. Just kind of hide it in the back, and I'm going to want to just make a little bit of a weave just to hold my yarn down, just to anchor it down a hair before I begin my cross stitch. So I'm going to turn my work around with the right side facing me. I'm going to see where my stitch marker is placed, and I'm going to bring my needle right through the bottom hole next to the bar my stitch marker is around. I'm going to remove my stitch marker, and I'm going to bring my first bar over, just over the bar right there in that row, and I'm going to put my work in. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use each of the holes that determine the different stitches from one another as my grid, as my guide. So normally, if I'm going to be making a cross stitch, I am typically going to continue working my same color into the same length, just doing the one stitch at a time in the one direction of the cross. And then as I work my way back, I will fill in the next direction. For this particular one, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to mark X marks the spot, mostly for your benefit, so you can see that this is the center. And then everything else works off of that center. So in my case, I'm going to want to go over another 4 stitches. So I'll just bring my yarn back up through here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing exactly what I started before, and I'm going to count over 4 times. So now I have my 4 bars, and I'm going to bring my yarn down and I'm going to work my way back. Now, because in this case, I'm not going to be too terribly concerned about how messy the back of my work is because it's going to be covered with another swatch of fabric. I'm just going to kind of shoot over here because I have one more X or one more cross that needs to be done in the dark purple right here in this particular pattern on this row. And so this is where I'm going to build my cross stitches off of. Now, you can see if I'm doing things right, I have a nice clean cross stitching pattern in the back. But as I said before, this is kind of where it got a little messy. And that's okay because it's not really going to be seen anyways. And I'm not going to be too hard on myself in terms of all that. But now what I want to do is, because I've come to the end of my yarn, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to weave in that little bit of yarn. I'm going to cut off my excess. And then I'm going to either cut more yarn of the purple or another color that I want to work with. It doesn't matter whichever direction you choose to go in, whatever suits you in terms of how you're going to work your piece. And so this being the bottom of my work, I can either leave those stitch markers in or I can take them out because I know that this cross right here, go ahead and pull that up a little bit. This cross right here is the center of my work, and I can, build off the rest of my color work right off of this. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to finish cross stitching this pattern on my swatch, and I will give you clearly a chance to do that for yourself. And I will meet you right back here in just a moment to move on to the next embroidery stitch that I'll be showing you how to do in terms of this particular project. I've finished my cross stitching, and yours should look something similar to this. And then next we're going to move on to a little bit of stem stitch work. So now I've already put the appropriate color that I'm going to use for this aspect of my piece. And I've already tied it in because what I'm doing is I'm working on this little section right here in my lavender color. So you can see that I have it here on this example, and I'm going to do the same thing here on this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring my yarn right up in about here. Now this is where you start going into, maybe a little bit of your own artistic feel. I'm going to show you what I do and how I do it and where I placed everything. And of course, you are welcome to copy that, or maybe you think something's going to look better. So don't let me stop you from expressing yourself in any way you think is appropriate for your piece. And so I'm just going to start doing the stem stitch. And this is going to serve as a little bit of a highlight just to add a bit of additional texture and dimension to the piece. Okay, so I have my little bit of lilac here, and you see it's here as well. And then I think that's it for this light purple or lilac color that I will be using on this particular piece. So I'm going to go ahead there again. I'm going to weave in my ends and then, cut off the extra yarn and move on to the next section. Okay, so now I've just simply anchored in the next color I'm using, and that's going to be this dark purple for me. And I'm going to bring it up right here at the end section of my lilac. So you could see right here, I used the dark purple, and it follows the back line of this part of the witch's hat. And that's what I'm going to do next. And then once I've completed down to just the top of the flowers right there, I got one little spot left to do. I'm then going to just go ahead and weave in my yarn, and I'm going to move to the next section. So again, I anchored in my yarn in the back, and I've pulled it right up here at sort of the back end of the inside bottom part of the witch's hat. So you can see right here too, this is where I began. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making kind of a, sort of an exaggerated S shape. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to bring my piece up over the first 3 stitches here on the brim of the hat. So I'm going to bring it up over these lilac stitches, and then I'm going to swoop it back down following the purple line of my cross stitches all the way to the back of the hat to where it ends right here at the next set of lilac stitches. So that's what I'm going to do with this. Okay, so now that I've finished my dark purple, and I've pretty much finished using whatever dark purple I'm going to use on this, I'm going to switch over to black. Now you can see that I've used black, or maybe you can't see. It's a little hard to see on video, the black. So you can see that I've used black yarn right through here to give a little separation from the brim and the band. And then here in this piece, my brim is actually black, but I'm going to still use black as my little separation. And then I'm going to go ahead and, like you see here that I did with my light green, and so I'm going to trim out the top of my band and then also the back of my band. So again, I'm going to start, right about here. And then I'm going to bring my black down and around like so. Again, still using a stem stitch. Now you can see I've finished up with my black yarn. So I've done the top part of my band and then also the back part of my band, as well as this line right here that delineates the brim of the hat from the actual band. So now I'm going to use a light green because it's the same color as my background. So here you can't probably see it. You just see mostly a clean edge following the top line of my witch's hat, but this is actually black, and I chose it because it does match the background. So in this case, since my background is this bright lime green, I am going to go ahead and use that particular color. And I'm going to follow the complete swirl of this hat all the way around. I'm going to end right about here. Okay, so now you can see where that line of that bright green has been placed. Just as with the black, gives it just a little more definition. And now we're going to move on to a different stitch. We're going to move on to the Lazy Daisy stitch. So go ahead and get whatever color you're going to use as your petals for the Lazy Daisy stitch. Anchor in the back of your yarn and I'll get to showing you what that looks like here. Okay, so for the lazy daisy stitch, you're just going to basically start wherever. And this is just one of those elements to this where you can really decide where these flower petals are going to go. So basically, I've pulled my yarn through. I'm going to loop my yarn back around, and I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to put it in basically the same place. And then I'm going to come up at where the tip of my petal is going to be. I'm going to pull my yarn through. And then I'm just going to anchor that in by putting my yarn through that same opening again, but on the other side of the loop. So it anchors in my loop and it looks a little bit like a petal. Now I'm going to continue to do that in a variety of different places in where this cluster of flowers is supposed to be. And that will give this piece just that little extra bit of dimension. Give these flowers kind of an impressionistic look. Again, there's not a lot of rhyme or reason where I choose to put the petals. It's just where I think they're going to look nice. Just so that I can give this, like I said, just a little more interest. And when I've finished doing that, I'm going to move on to the French knot. And the French knot will be that last little bit of element that ties everything together in terms of the flower aspect of this hat. So as you can see now that I'm finished with the little lazy daisy stitch, it just gives it a little extra, again, dimension, adds a little extra layering without adding too much bulk, because you really don't want the bulk there, because you want everything to lay flat so that when you put your mug on there, there's not going to be any tipping of your mug. And so yeah, so we're going to go ahead and now we're going to move on to the French knots. Now in this case, I'm going to use this cream color for my French knot. It's going to be the lightest color that I have in this piece. And you can see where I've placed 5 French knots on this piece. You can place however many you want or how few you want. There again, it's just the last little bit of flower element to give it just that little extra bit of interest. So now to begin with my French knot, I'm going to have my yarn pulled through and I'm going to wrap it 3 times around my needle. And then I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to insert my needle into a spot right next to where I pulled my yarn out of. Now you don't want to go into the same hole. What you want to do is, but you want to insert your needle very close to that hole. So I got my 3 wraps. I'm going to insert my needle very close to the original hole. And then I'm just going to hold on to this and pull it through gently and just let it pull through. And then I don't want to pull on it too hard. I just want to give it a nice little tug in order to get that French knot. So again, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put another one right here. I'm going to insert my needle right next to where I originally pulled my yarn through. And I'm going to gently pull that yarn on through to create my knot. And I'm going to do it again right about here. Because what I'm doing is I want the placement of these knots to be about where the placement of these knots are. Because I, of course, want my rug mugs to match as much as possible. Okay, so now that I've finished my French knots, I'm going to move on to the next step of this. So break out your background color in your yarn and then also your standard hook you've been working with. So I've got my hook, I've got my first swatch, and I've got my second swatch, and we're going to actually crochet these together. So this is the wrong side of this swatch, so I'm going to lay it with wrong side facing up. Let's see, the edges are a little curly. And then of course, this is the right side and then the wrong side of my work, and I'm going to face the wrong side of this swatch against the wrong side of this swatch. and have the right sides facing out. And then I'm going to find a section, and what I'm going to do is I am going to single crochet them together. So basically you're going to put a single crochet in each stitch, and you're going to put a single crochet in each row. So let me just go ahead and start here. And I've got the two of them together. I'm going to go ahead and tie in my yarn. And then I'm going to begin to crochet. And then when I get to the corner, I'm going to place three single crochets into the same stitch. So I'll show you what I mean if you don't understand what I'm talking about. Okay. So now I'm up here and I've got to the corner and I have one single crochet in there now. And I'm going to put 2 and then 3. And then I'm going to continue into the next single crochet stitch on this side, and then of course the one in the back behind it. And I'm going to continue single crocheting my 2 pieces together. Okay, so now that you see that both sides are sandwiched together, I have a nice piece of fabric. It's not too thick, but it's just the right thickness to handle anything hot, keep the wood from scratching that might be on your table underneath the piece. It really is going to be a nice solid piece of linen for you. Okay, so we're going to move on now that we're ready to do so to the border. So now we're going to move on to the border, and this border is sometimes referred to as like a candy cane border or a barber pole border or a chain looping border. It has several different names, but it's really this kind of spiral looking two-toned border that I think is fun and perfect for a witchy theme. So in this case, you can see where I use the dark purple and this bright green. For this piece right here, I'm actually going to use the dark purple and then my dark green. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to start with the green. And I'm going to tie my green right into a corner stitch. So this one I'll do right here. I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and get that tied in. And then this little end I'll weave in, or I'll work in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to chain 3. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to pull out my hook. I'm going to set that aside. And then I'm going to get my next color. It's going to be this dark purple. I'm going to tie this in. But this time I'm going to tie it into the very next stitch. I don't know if you can see that. So this is where my dark green is tied into, and I'm going to tie my dark purple right into this stitch. And then I'm also going to chain 3. So 1, maybe I'll get it, 2, and 3. It can be a little tricky trying to show you these steps on camera. Okay, so now you can see I have those 2 colors tied in. I'm going to take my green, and then I'm going to go right here and I'm going to single crochet in the next stitch from the purple. I'm using purple. You might be using a different color. That's fine. Same concept. So I've done my single crochet, and now I'm going to chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to pull my hook out. I'm going to pick up my purple, and then I'm going to bring my purple in front of the green. And I'm going to single crochet into the very next stitch. Just like so. And then I'm going to chain 3. Get those little strands out of the way. And I'm going to take my green and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to bring my green over the purple. I'm going to insert my hook into the very next stitch. And then I'm going to single crochet into that stitch. And I'm going to chain 3. Sorry, this is a little fiddly while I'm trying to do this on camera. It should be easier when you don't have a camera that you're trying to show this under. But anyway, so you can kind of see what I'm doing, and you get this really nice looking spiral shape in the 2 colors. And so then again, I'm going to take my purple again, and I'm going to single crochet right there into the very next stitch. And I'm going to continue that all the way around until I get back here, and then I'm going to join, and I'll show you how I join when I get there. Now, as far as the corners are concerned, don't worry about doing anything special. Just continue to follow the same exact pattern as you started with. By nature of the stitch itself, it'll wrap itself around those corners just nicely without anything special other than just the pattern you're already following. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish this, and then I'll show you what I do in terms of finishing this off, and then we'll talk. Okay, so now we've come back around, and this is where I'm at. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take my green in order to finish off here. I'm going to tie it right here into the appropriate stitch, as usual. And basically, I'm just going to do a slip stitch, and this, I'm just going to weave that in when I'm finished. Next, I'm going to take my dark purple, and I'm just going to, if I had an open stitch, I would use that open stitch, but what I have is this last stitch right here, which is basically the first stitch. So really all I need to do there is just go ahead, and again, I'm just going to slip stitch my yarn right into that stitch. And I'm going to go ahead and I am going to weave this in as well, just like so. Next, I'm going to block my work so it's nice and flat, and I'll show you what that looks like right this moment. And then once you've blocked your piece, according to the yarn that you happen to be using, you should have a fantastic rug mug that looks similar to this. This is perfect for any witchy person, any person who just wants to have a little bit of fun in their life, anyone who likes dark, spooky things, and of course, it's perfect for any time of the year.